choose your peace without abandoning power, because strength isn't about force. It's about using energy and leverage to stay grounded when life gets intense.
Hey, my friends, it's Kelly Reeves, and welcome to the Confidence Academy. Hey, my friends, and welcome to the Confidence Academy. I'm your host, Kelly Reeves, and I am so excited that you're here today because my guest is Albert Gonzales. He's a certified Jiu-Jitsu coach with the Carlson Gracie Association. Now, Albert and I, because I teach women's self-defense, and together, he and I joined forces where I teach women self-defense from the standpoint of situational awareness, avoidance, and de-escalation techniques. And of course, as a jiu-jitsu instructor, he teaches the physical self-defense part of what to do if you're ever involved, God forbid, in a physical attack. So if you're here, that means so much to me, and it tells me that you care about your personal safety and you also care about your confidence and your mindset. And if you're new here, welcome to the Confidence Academy family. And if someone shared this with you, thank them, because that means they care about you, your personal safety, your confidence, and they care about your ability to step out of your comfort zone and try something new that could really, truly improve your life. So we don't only talk about self-defense here and jiu-jitsu moves. We talk about how having this level of discipline can have such an incredible and positive impact in every area of your life, from your relationships, your work, your family, and every area, to teach you resilience, to teach you how to get back up again, and to give you that confidence you need in almost every situation in life. So thank you again for being here, and let's welcome Albert Gonzales to the Confidence Academy. Albert Gonzales, it's so great to see you. So do I call you Al, Albert? I think I've always just called you Albert.
That's fine. You can call me Albert.
Okay. So for the listeners and anybody who's listening, you are a certified jiu-jitsu coach with the Carlson Gracie Association. So for anybody who's listening who might be thinking, yeah, jiu-jitsu is great, it sounds great, but I'm too old, too out of shape, too this, too that. How do you, for anyone's listening who's thinking like, I don't even want to listen to this conversation because it's not for me. How do you address that?
So, the jiu-jitsu's got multiple benefits, and, we can unwrap those questions one by one, for example, with whether you're too old or whether, what are the benefits? So the overarching benefits, one, are Rome, like Romeo, wasn't built overnight. So there's lots of life lessons. And what we try to do specifically at our school or academy is we like to develop attributes. And it doesn't matter if you're male, female, child. It doesn't matter what demographics you represent. You're going to gain something out of it. And some of the attributes that we try to develop are, without diving down into too many specifics, they're broken up into categories, but grit, mental acuity. So that's kind of like that fight or flight conditioning. Mm-hmm. I've listened to some of your past podcasts. We've had previous discussions. So yeah. I think those terms will come up frequently. Drive, and also leadership skills. So the other benefits that aren't as tangible would be more like you're going to move like a fighter, right? Mm-hmm. It teaches you to be strategic, and it also transcends outside of the gym. So those are kind of the 50,000 square foot or 50,000 foot elevation view. But nevertheless, like, am I too old? So you're never too old to be bold. Never too old to be bold.
Thank you. Amen.
And but we need to make assumptions on like starting points.
Right.
So if I was to make the statement that jiu-jitsu is for everybody, that would be an untrue statement.
Right.
Because we have to start with some general assumptions like starting points. What I mean by that is you need to have a body that functions reasonably well. It doesn't mean you have to be tip-top shape, but it means like there's a formula. And the formula is like the quality of your jiu-jitsu is directly proportionate to your movement, and the quality of your movement is directly proportionate to your mobility.
Right.
So what that means is like, you can be like relatively lean, general mobility. That means like you don't want to be ailing with any significant like knee problems, hips, back, neck. I mean, you want to consult your physician.
You can't come in on a walker.
That's correct. Yeah. But I mean, there's actually some funny stories about that.
All right. Well, we're going to have to hear those.
And cardiovascular health, you know, as we age, we kind of prioritize different lifestyles. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, as we age, we also start to lose that max heart rate.
Right.
But nevertheless, so those are some like basic things that you should have previously to starting or prior to starting jiu-jitsu. It doesn't mean you have to go work out the gym for a year to be able to enter jiu-jitsu. It just means that if you didn't have some of those basic skill sets or basic attributes to your lifestyle as you sit now, then we would probably end up, you know, recommending like you go through an 8 to 10 week introductory course to help you fundamentally get those movements. And get the nomenclature and, you know, get the tribal norms. And then we would put you in a beginner's class. But those are just some of the few things in general when people say, am I too old? Because do you know who Anthony Bourdain is? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think everybody knows Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah.
So if I gave you some names like Audrey Gracie or Buchecha, Leo Vieira, you're like, okay, those all sound like exotic names, right? I'm kind of intrigued. But if I tell you Anthony Bourdain, like he, as a blue belt, which is like your second year of jiu-jitsu if you train regularly. Right. He did more for jiu-jitsu and getting the name out than all three of those guys combined. And those are like three like world champion if you know who they are, those are like the epitome of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in the world. Right. And the point to that is Anthony Bourdain started when he was 58.
Wow. God bless him.
So it's never too late. It's never too late to start jiu-jitsu. Yeah.
And I love that because when you and I have taught together in self-defense classes, and one of the things, especially with, you know, older women, and I hate to classify myself as an older woman, but in my 50s and up, is that am I too old, and the intimidation factor.
Sure.
So it's whether it's a general self-defense class, firearms, but especially with jiu-jitsu and any martial arts, or even sometimes just going into the gym, it is intimidating.
Right.
So what is it? And I know when I went to your class, I mean, I was intimidated as heck. I mean, and I consider myself a pretty confident person.
Right.
So what would you say to those, like, how do you help people break through those intimidation barriers? Like, assuming they're healthy enough.
Sure.
But getting them past that, look, you can do this. Just take that step one.
So I think like what stops people from, essentially it's how I'm reading your question, right? It's how I'm understanding your question. I think that there's a certain amount of anxiety that not only, and what's funny is like, there's not really that big a difference between men and women, kids, whether male or female, with anxiety. That's correct. Cause I think it's cause, I can't remember where I read this at, but I did, remember the quote that like anxiety is focusing on the things you can't control in the future, whereas like depression is focusing on the things you didn't control in the past. Right. So there's a certain amount of anxiety to walking into a room, especially when you don't know anybody. Like I mentioned earlier, you don't know the movements, you don't know the nomenclature. But I think the main thing is what I was getting at earlier is between men and women is there's a little bit of ego. And what I mean by, and it's not negative, nothing negative about ego. And even a little narcissism is okay. Right. You don't want to be on a 1 where you're passive, but you don't want to be on a 10 where like all you care about is yourself, right? Yeah. So a happy medium is good. So even with a happy medium of ego is good. We have to be self-aware. But it's not, you know, some people just don't like being terrible at something. And jiu-jitsu is a very, very humbling and humiliating, right? Yes. and we're risk averse as humans. That's kind of how we're designed. Because I mean, there was dinosaurs, you know, there was wars. There was, possibilities of losing your family or getting kidnapped and being taken away to a foreign land, right? So we've kind of evolved, and not in the evolutional way, but we've kind of evolved over time to be, protect ourselves and not put ourselves at risk. We also have a negative perception of conflict. Right. And I mean, we all think of conflict as like, oh, two people, you see the like ideal picture, two people face to face, nose to nose, and they're about to fight, or somebody's threatened, or even somebody bigger than, especially somebody smaller, which in this case, most of the time is men and women, right? Or, I mean, there's people of various sizes and weights. But nevertheless, we think that like conflict is bad, but actually conflict is good. Yeah. It helps us evolve. It helps us get through those fight or flight tendencies. It helps us build on the attributes that I had mentioned earlier, like grip, mental acuity, those types of things. So
tell us about your jiu-jitsu journey. How did you get started, and what drew you to it, and kind of kept you going to the point where you are now?
Sure. So I would say that if you were to ask like the common, we'll just go male, right? So the UFC targets males 18 to 34. Now they're finding a niche, just like the National Football League. Right. They're finding a niche now with women as well. So I don't want to exclude women, but let's face it, that was the target audience, 18 to 34. And so I'm part of that original US viewership that saw Royce Gracie in 1994, this thin Brazilian, unintimidating, pretty good looking guy, face these 6'5" monsters of men, right? Specimens of men. And nobody could tell what he was doing, but he was winning the fights. Right. And he wasn't utilizing what we in martial arts consider like a hard style. A hard style, not to digress, but a hard style is what you would consider like your boxing and your kempo and your karate, right? Yeah. All the striking styles. Right. So I saw that and I was immediately intrigued. Yeah. But I also lived in the Central Coast of California. Now you know where that's at. Maybe some of your viewers, my hope is that your viewers are they're from all statewide, all over. Yes, I'm hoping that for you. Yeah. Because I just want that for the best for you. But nevertheless, so there isn't there's not a big population here. We're not from Los Angeles or, New York, the Bay Area, Miami, New York, right? But California just so happened to be at the time like the Southern California with like the biggest hub of jiu-jitsu outside of Brazil. Oh, so I had moved to Palm Desert, Palm Springs area. So most of your viewers may or may not know that. It was, if you live in California, you know where Palm Springs is. Yes. But I found a jiu-jitsu gym in 1999 in a little place called Cathedral City. A little shout out to Kurt Rojo, who probably doesn't know my face anymore, but it was a very small school. He actually still has a school down in Southern California. But I found it there. And then I had lost it for a little bit, but when I moved back to the Central Coast, there just so happened to be a guy from Hawaii under the House and Gracie Association who was in Atascadero, like the only jiu-jitsu school in San Luis Obispo County. There's practitioners. There's stories of Gene LaBelle, who's a very popular American black belt in judo. And there was guys who trained jiu-jitsu in Santa Barbara with various jiu-jitsu instructors, but this was the only school in San Luis Obispo County. Right. And once I started again, I told myself I was never going to lose it again. Good for you. So you had asked me a question earlier on what keeps it going. So my students ask me that all the time, like coach, because by occupation, by trade, I'm a coach and an educator. By occupation, I'm a cat herder. So what that means is I got me too. 3 or 4 different things going at all the times. I'm not happy unless I'm running around with my hair on fire. Right. That's my personality. What hair I have left. Yeah. But nevertheless, they ask me all the time, why do you do it? Like, how do you show up every day consistently with a smile and put out the energy level that you do, which hopefully we'll get to later on that discussion. And you know what? You know why? Because it's hard. Yeah. That's why I do it, because it's hard. It's not the easiest thing. I think about I had a mother who worked 12-hour, 13-hour days. And so when I think about like just grinding and grit and never giving up and not quitting, like that's why I do jiu-jitsu. It's my testament to my upbringing, but it's also like something I don't want to, Lord willing, I don't want to let it go. And because it's hard, that's why I do it. It's to build the consistency, to build the grit, to build the mental acuity, to build all the attributes that we had mentioned earlier. That's why I do it.
You kind of answered my next question, because it's like, because, when you talk about jujitsu and martial arts, like immediately the lay person just thinks of self-defense.
Sure.
And, obviously for me as a self-defense instructor, I always say that's your first, aside from like situational awareness and the proactive stuff, avoiding a situation.
Right.
Like step 2 would be martial arts before any type of weapon, lethal or non-lethal.
Sure.
Because, you can either run, which is defense, but if now you can't, now you're being held from behind or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like you've got to be able to get out of that.
Right.
So that's usually your front line. But like, what do you feel teaches you and your students? Like, what does jiu-jitsu teach you beyond self-defense?
Okay. So I would say, let's qualify it because, because I'm speaking to you as a female. I would say that not only for self-defense, but you're looking for the plus. Here's the plus, because there are negatives to doing anything. I mean, right. I've been hurt worse playing basketball,
right,
than I have been at jiu-jitsu. I mean, I've had sprained knee, sprained ankle, torn Achilles, all for playing basketball.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and from jiu-jitsu, I have like maybe I have toes that are stubbed, and sometimes I'll have occasional like fingers that will get not dislocated but get sprained, right? So so I would trade that any day for the basketball. Yeah. Mild, yeah, exactly. So I would say like the workouts for one. So if anybody was like, okay, why should I do, like you asked earlier, why should I do jiu-jitsu as a female? And you already named it, self-defense would be the primary rationale. Mm-hmm. But like the workouts are a mixture of cardio, mobility, and physical fitness. Mm-hmm. So strength. Now, strength can be categorized on multiple different levels. So you have your physical strength, right, which is your body confidence. Mm-hmm. And then you have your mental strength, which is like your personal perception, your emotional behavior, dealing with anxiety. Mm-hmm. Jiu-jitsu will also help you with your PTSD, your social anxiety. That's like those are some things that aren't tangible, right, that you'll find in jiu-jitsu. Likewise, you have the cognitive benefits, which is like increased focus. Essentially, if I was to give you a quote, it would be, choose your peace without abandoning power, because strength isn't about force. It's about using energy and leverage to stay grounded when life gets intense. So
I love that. And I think that is not just in self-defense, but in everything in life. Like you can use those skills in like conflicts at the workplace or with your partner, and I know like with my nephew, who he just got his brown belt in jiu-jitsu, and he's 15, and that it has really changed his level of confidence and self-assuredness. And he's gone from this skinny little kid to being this little, I mean, he's still skinny, but sure, he's got a whole different attitude about himself. And school and high school is, torturous for teenagers.
Right.
So I do believe jiu-jitsu has helped give him the confidence to pursue things that he probably wouldn't have done it if he didn't have that.
Right. So, and I would say for kids too, like they, I think all of us have similar attributes, but we're all on different scales.
Right.
like you said earlier, like you for the fight or flight, like you're immediately probably like on an 8 or 9 on let's fight,
Right.
because that's what you do all the time. Right.
Right.
But if you get some of your students, they're like 1, only because they can't be 0 because they are live. Right.
Right.
So I would say with the children, like jiu-jitsu does help develop the same attributes. Right. And again, I categorized them, and I didn't get the idea. I didn't make up the idea myself. I mean, none of us really, we're all self-taught, right? But I got the idea from attributes by a writer by the name of Rich Deviney. And I might have butchered his last name, but he's got a book on developing attributes for high-performing teams. So I've taken some of the attributes out because he trains Navy SEALs, right? And although there's some transcending ideas and philosophies, I don't necessarily train killers, right? That's not what I do. That's not the persona I want to give, right?
Right.
But they do. But again, the jiu-jitsu, specifically jiu-jitsu. We're talking about the soft art, the grappling arts.
Right.
And I mean, even though wrestling is a very, very, very intense, I would say physically harder than jiu-jitsu, but wrestling doesn't offer all the other mobility and agility and skill sets, submission skill sets, and life lesson skill sets. But even those are all the soft arts, the grappling arts probably help develop the attributes the most.
Right.
But also, and we talked about attributes, but what's like a skill is like grace under pressure.
Right.
It's like, how do you deal with failure? That's where jiu-jitsu really helps you, because in wrestling you get pinned. But in jiu-jitsu is like you have to, even though it has a negative connotation, we talked about these earlier, like what are some of the, I don't know, or maybe we didn't. Maybe it's in my mind, but we talked about, perceptions, negative perceptions and connotations, but they would be submitting.
Right.
So every day in jiu-jitsu is like, hey, I'm tapping. I recognize that you could have dislocated my elbow. Right. Or you could have choked me and I wouldn't be waking up. Right. So, or giving me some type of, long-term damage. So I'm submitting. I'm tapping to say, I'm no longer want to fight.
I'm out.
You've bested me at this moment. Let's go again. Right. That's the
right.
So, and also I think for the final thing that I think that jiu-jitsu does for children is it helps them build responsibility. Right. You can't make excuses. You were the only one. You're the only one on the mat by yourself. Like you can't blame mom or dad or you can't blame McGee was dirty, or you can't blame anything else but yourself. And so that in the end, that actually helps build on your preparation and your execution. So, and I think those are 4 key things that help kids, other than what we mentioned earlier about women, which some of those things transcend both male, female, adult, children. But again, those are 4 things that I think would help children. How jiu-jitsu helps children.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's, probably across the board, because I know a lot of adults that could use a good sense of accountability. Sure. Yeah. We don't want to admit like, oh, I was wrong. It's easy to place blame. But if you're in that position of having to kind of admit failure, and it was just you and your opponent in the mat, and you have to tap out. But it's also resilience building, I would say, too, because it's like, okay, I'm tapping out, but I'm going to get back up again and keep fighting. Right. And how that plays out in everyday life off the mat. Like, I didn't get the job, but I'm going to keep going and keep fighting. Or I'm going through this divorce, but I'm going to keep fighting, or whatever, So I can see how that could definitely help. And yeah, like I have a higher threat threshold, and a lot of the women in my class, they're previous victims of assault, and they didn't fight, and they either froze. They typically froze. They couldn't flee. So, but now they're like, I went through that attack. I don't know if jiu-jitsu could have helped me. So how do you, because I've heard that too, and I'm like, I don't ever know how to answer that question, because I'm thinking something's better than nothing. Right. But how do you address that kind of mindset? So
I wowould say, like, you have to remember like the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu. So this is probably what's best here is like a short history lesson. Time doesn't permit a long one, but you have to remember that the Jiu-Jitsu was developed in Japan during the modernization and imperialization of Japan. So we're talking 1800s, early 1900s.
Right.
And it was taken from the samurai, and basically it was the unarmed combat. Okay, so we're talking weaponless, no swords, no staffs, all of the whatever action movie you're thinking that the Japanese had in their hands at the time of battle. So it was developed into judo, and the reason is because if you think about it, if we were to practice every day like we were fighting with our fists, right. Guys would have broken knuckles all the time. Yeah. Right? We would have black eyes. Yeah. I mean, it would be pretty brutal. It's pretty hard to do. So what Jigoro Kano decided to do, as he's the founder of judo, is he decided to make an art where they could practice all the time. So fast forward to the imperialization of Japan. That means, for all of you listeners who aren't familiar with history, that means the imperialization means you're going to other countries, colonizing them, right, with some benefit for your country or for yourself, right? And if you take over the country at the time, fantastic. If you don't, well, then you've created the trade routes for future endeavors. Right. So nevertheless, when they settled to Brazil, they brought their form of judo, and the Brazilians put their mix on it by not only did they take out the striking and the punching, which judo had already done previously, right, but they focused on leverage, and they focused on closing the distance, gaining control. If you get them on the ground, but if you're on the ground, being able to reverse the position, again, based off of leverage, into sweeps, so where you can get out, or whether you can make your opponent submit, or in a way, basically disable them so they can't hurt you anymore. Right. So for anybody that say, I don't know if jiu-jitsu would have helped, I would say that they probably have some misconception of what actually jiu-jitsu is, right? Or they actually haven't tried it. Right. They have not tried it, because we have 90-pound, 12-year-old girls sweeping 135-pound boys, and we have 250-pound men grappling 145-pound men, and we have 110-pound girls grappling 200-pound men. I know, I've seen them. Yeah, and your daughters, and they're doing just fine. That's correct. They're doing just fine, and these are even my daughters and not my daughters. My adopted daughters in here for jiu-jitsu, but and my fellow teammates. But right. So I would say that I know PTSD is real, trauma is real. I definitely 100% agree with you, but the good news about if what jiu-jitsu would work is the best thing I could say is you should find out. You should really try it to find out. Yeah. And when that has come up, by a former assault victim, it's kind of okay. And it's very careful, because I understand they've been traumatized, and there's a lot more that goes into my recommendation, okay, what kind of therapy have you been through? What kind of help did you seek? So I believe that comment comes from, look, it happened to me, and it was just so awful and terrible that maybe I don't even want to know that there was something I could have done to prevent it. Right. So, but the goal is to educate, okay, we don't want it to happen again. And what if now this is your way of fighting back in a different way? So, I would say that the best thing about jiu-jitsu is you train how you fight. Right. So we discussed earlier, if you were to box without gloves, or you were to kick without foot protection, like the Muay Thai fighters, which again is a hard discipline, right? It's not a soft discipline. Then without the shin pads, without blocking, you'd have broken ribs, right? You'd have dislocated knees, broken shin, swollen. You wouldn't be able to walk for weeks. Yeah. But so with jiu-jitsu that's the best thing about jiu-jitsu is you can practice at significantly high intensity and the risk of injury is really, really low.
Right.
Really low. I'm not saying injury doesn't happen, but again, I could step off of the mat and twist my ankle. So those, the more exposure you have to being able to get hurt, the more the more the probability is you're going to get hurt. Right. So, but that's that's what separates jiu-jitsu over all the other martial arts, including wrestling.
So, and I've always wondered, like, how do people choose? Because there's jiu-jitsus, there's Krav Maga, there's karate, there's all different types of martial arts. If somebody's just starting this journey, how do they choose the one that's right for them?
Well, I would say, I'm biased, right? So that's what I call my SPO, my stinky, humble, biased opinion. Okay? Right. So I would say that jiu-jitsu, for the reasons I just stated, but historically people choose because word of mouth. You've done your own marketing. You've had some experience in different business enterprises. So word of mouth seems to be like, well, how and why people choose, or else they're intrigued. Maybe they're just at that stage in their life and they're walking by and there's a sign that says jiu-jitsu and somebody makes that life decision, I'm going to try.
Right.
So, but I would say like I recommended the parents that I have, and perhaps not the best business practice, but I recommend is like, there's like, what should I do? People ask me all the time. It's kind of that old cliche. Like if I had a penny for every time someone asked me, right? If I had $1 for every time someone asked me, I would say the best foundational training for your children, whether you're trying to build a competitor or whether you're just trying to get free babysitting for an hour is I would say you go to have your kids wrestle, have them do gymnastics, judo, or jiu-jitsu, because you get that body recognition, that mobility, that agility, that is the foundation. That is the foundation for everything else physical that you'll do in your life. So I'll give you an example. There's really not. I have this conversation. So I have some college athletes. My kids, for those, I think we've discussed it, but I have adult children. One's ran D1. One's played college in basketball. My daughter's played basketball in college, excuse me. And nevertheless, we had this conversation like, what sports transcend other sports? And track by far. I didn't get a chance to run track, but I absolutely love track. Right. But track transcends every sport. Every sport, with the exception of swimming, you're going to be running. Right. Whereas like baseball, even though I personally think that the skill to hit a baseball is probably the hardest skill in sports. I personally think, again, remember, humbly biased opinion on my part, right? Stinky, humble biased. Yeah. But so I would say like jiu-jitsu will be a great foundation. I've had students or I've been on the soccer field because I have smaller children as well, with my same wife, beautiful wife, who's put up with me for more years than I've been training jiu-jitsu. God bless her. Because that's a hard task, right? Right. But we've been on the soccer fields with our little ones, and it's like, how are your kids not afraid of contact? You see that ball coming, and it's a 50-50 ball, and those kids are running, and they're about to collide, and one kid stops. Right. They do not want the impact, which is part of that risk averse we talked about earlier. Whereas the kids that you see train, now gymnastics doesn't give you this. Right. The kids that wrestled or do judo or jiu-jitsu, they'll go for the ball. Right. They're not afraid of the contact. They've been conditioned to not avoid the conflict that was going to come with that collision. Right. So that's one thing where I would say for kids, that's why you would choose jiu-jitsu, right? That's because you're going to get the transcending. For adults, again, if you're trying to, I call it the Al Bundy effect. Right. Where we were these athletes. We were these great athletes, right? Luckily for you, you've maintained your beauty. For me, I'm gradually getting uglier. Right? Come on. So we're kind of living off of our past, right? So you have people that in their mind, they think they're like they were when they were in their early 20s and teens, where they were the prom queen or where they were the best basketball player in the county and the best football player. But the reality is they've been sitting dormant for 15, 20 years. And and you could get it from CrossFit. You can get the same similar community from CrossFit.
Right.
But the reality is like jiu-jitsu will rebuild or help you rebuild that agility, the stability in your bones, right? If you go to CrossFit right off of the street and have not trained, you're going to implode from the inside.
Right.
Whereas jiu-jitsu, you come in, you can gradually build up, and your agility level and your skill set is going to grow, not exponentially, but depending on your environment, it's going to grow really, really fast. And then you'll be able to cross-train. You'll be able to go back to lifting or swimming or rock climbing or anything that you've really been wanting to do, but unfortunately your sedentary life just hasn't allowed you to do so.
But I would also say with aging, because like for me, at my age and menopause, and they're always saying with women, now we got to look at, things like osteoporosis and, stuff like that. And they say, do cardio and weightlifting. Well, okay, but that's kind of very vague. So I could see how jiu-jitsu could help women in my age class, the perimenopause and menopause, where our bodies are changing so much, but we have to keep up a certain health standard just to, one, be healthy. But it seems like a really great way, because it's like, oh, cardio and lift weights, okay, great. But that just seems so, one, it seems so boring. And two, maybe you can't lift weights. So I would see how jiu-jitsu could offset that while you can still build that strength, but it's also impacting in a positive way your mind as well.
Right. And like I said, it gives you a foundation of which to build off of.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm a big proponent of lifting. I mean, if I was to turn the camera in the gym where I sit now, I mean, you'll see squat racks and a lot of powerlifting equipment that we have in here. And I'm not a very big guy. Of course, I'm not maxing out on these things either, like some of the other guys are too. Right. But I'm a big proponent of cross training. But the question becomes: could I do some of those movements and recover the way I do without jiu-jitsu? And the answer is no. Because jiu-jitsu helps you in your recovery as well. So that's another added benefit based off of that comment that you just said. So,
yeah. So if you could go back to yourself on your very first day of on the mat, not knowing that you're going to do this 26 years later, what would you tell your first on the mat self? Sure.
So there was two waves, right? There's a little bit of a gap from jiu-jitsu had changed in 5 years between training in Palm Springs, Cathedral City, and training in Atascadero. Jiu-jitsu had completely changed. It is constantly evolving. Right. Constantly evolving. There's moves today that may have been done by one or two people just be based off of their creativity level, right? Right. they never regularly practiced it. It was just a one-off. There's moves that are being invented and perfected every day. Yeah. Every day. Whereas like with boxing, you have the same, combinations. Still have the overhand, you still have the hook, you still have the uppercut, you still have the jab. But they haven't added any new punches. Right. And so that's not to degrade boxing. I have a high amount of respect for any fighter, especially boxing. Right. But the change in the moves, I had wished that I had stayed through the evolution because I missed it. I wish I had never quit. But I found it again. But I also wish I had spent more time competing. I did spend a lot of time competing. So at the time, in the U.S., there's only so many tournaments. Like the East Coast hadn't really populated with jiu-jitsu yet. There was maybe at the time back in the early 90s, 2000s, Renzo Gracie had already moved into New York. Carlson Gracie, the school I represent, he was in the late 90s, had moved into Chicago. But all of the tournaments were here in California. All the competitions, the main ones. The Worlds had come to the California in 2007. Pan Ams were here in the U.S. There was the U.S. Open, which was the longest running, I think it was since 1996. But I wish I had spent more time competing. And the reason is this. I don't know if you were an athlete or not, but if you ask any athlete, any serious athlete, what do you wish, if you could go back right now, you could go back right this minute and go compete again at a high level, would you do it? And almost every single athlete that I ask says yes. Now I know it's theory and we know it's not real, right? We Wizard of Oz, you just can't click your heels with ruby red slippers, right? But the reality is that time and the sacrifice, working towards a common goal with the group that you worked, and the sweat and the tears and the discipline, like that is something that we all strive for. Right. And it's not just for men, it's for women as well. Like, right. When we looked physically well, we felt physically good. And I don't want my youth. I'm not that. I'm a realist. Right. I just want that, to be able to do that before life creeps in, and family obligations and work obligations and health, when all those things start to degrade. Like, those are what you look at for the fun times. And it's different than the Al Bundy effect, because it's like a second chance. That's what I wish I would have spent more time doing. And I competed for years, from 2005 to 2012. I competed at a pretty high level. So,
but you wish you would have done it sooner.
I wish I'd have done it sooner and more of it. That's correct. Because it's gone now. It's now I've changed my life, not my lifestyle, but my focus has changed. Right. I'm more focused on my students and my family and life circumstances, right? Yeah. There's things that I can't sacrifice anymore that I could have sacrificed for them, because the opportunity cost wasn't as great as it is now. So I wish I would have had the opportunity to practice against people I didn't normally roll with more, which is why we compete.
Yeah. Starbuck, what do you think is the most misunderstood thing about jiu-jitsu?
I would say there's some negative connotations based off of what people have seen for they associate. The thing about jiu-jitsu, the gap is closing. But the thing about jiu-jitsu up until about 4 or 5 years ago is you could only be a jiu-jitsu practitioner and still fight MMA. Right. You could have very, very poor striking skills and still have a chance to win a fight, right? Right. Whereas if you put a striker, everybody's got a puncher's chance. But for the most part, the strikers just didn't do well unless they had some significant knowledge of grappling. And it wasn't to submit somebody, it was to recognize what they were doing to them. Right. So I would say the negative connotations are that people have of jiu-jitsu is first of all, I don't like people touching me. Right. Okay. Yeah. And
it's very intimate.
Yeah, exactly. Or I got a thing with feet. Right. That's something I hear regularly too. I don't like feet. Right. But I would say, I don't know anyone. People will say, I don't know anyone. Those are the physical portions, right? But my answer to all three of those is, you're never going to be able to pick your attacker. Right. You're never going to be able to pick the time when you're going to have to use your jiu-jitsu. Yeah. Right. So those are things, and some of those are legitimate, but most of them are ego-based, right? Those are excuses, right? Yeah. There's reasons and results. Right. So I would say also for women, I don't want to be under a man, or I don't want to have another man that's not my boyfriend or husband between my legs, right? Yeah. And I would say for the latter, I would say, well, it's your perception. You can look at it as intimate, which is not. Right. Or you can look at it as controlling them, which is empowering. Right. Yeah. So I think it's all about, perception and how we perceive it. Yeah. And I would say the mental side is I'm not wired that way. Yeah. Well, it sounds to me like you have your challenge switch off. Yeah. Often. Yeah. You don't want to try anything new, and you don't have to try jiu-jitsu. You can rock climb, or you can try to climb Mount Everest, right? If that fits your fancy. But those are things that I've heard of why people don't want to do jiu-jitsu. And those are all, to me, sound like, again, risk aversion. Just don't want to try anything new. And there's really no convincing them otherwise at that point, right?
Yeah.
I would say that perception processing, like if you have the craftsman mindset, then jiu-jitsu is for you.
Right.
I would say another one is like if you see problems as opportunities to succeed, jiu-jitsu is for you.
Yeah.
Right. If you're a glass half full kind of person, jiu-jitsu is for you.
Right.
Jiu-jitsu is for you. So even though it seems like an environment of dysfunction, right? Because you're like, okay, now I have to be hot, sweaty, potentially some of the things is people's feet. That was the less extreme. The most extreme is I got to have a man between my legs, which we have women that could train with women. If somebody has something that whether they don't want to train with the man or not, we rarely see that. Just so you know, we try to at first put women with women. Of course, we're trying not to put 12-year-old girls with grown men for reasons we don't even have to state.
Right.
But nevertheless, I would say like I'm hot, sweaty. Also, I'm going to get critiqued. I'm going to suck. I'm going to suck at something, right? That's remember I told you there's a really big difference between women and men. I actually find like with the women, they're the ones that are the most competitive. Like they don't want to suck.
Right.
Like they do not want to be, they do not want to look bad, right? They want to be like the best. They want to get complimented. They're doing well. And it's got nothing to do with being male or female. It's just, this is my unofficial survey, right?
Right. Yeah.
But if you want to train to be a competitor with the competitor mindset, you don't have to compete. But if you want to train to get the competitor mindset, that can transcend into your relationships, that can transcend into your workplace, that can transcend into your business, then jiu-jitsu is for you. Jiu-jitsu is for you.
Yeah. And, and you're right. I mean, some of the positions are pretty compromising. And, because I've trained with you.
Sure.
But I don't have any of those issues. I'm like, let's just go for it.
Sure.
But I can understand how, especially we're always, we keep talking about risk aversion. We're always afraid to try something new because we're afraid of failing at it. Even if it's trying a new, like I'm going to try this new dish to cook for my family, but what if I burn it? Or what if I'll just stick with the old thing I cook every night, because we're afraid to step out of our comfort zones. And there's a whole psychology to that. So when have you had like a student or someone who is just like seemingly so adverse, but you were able to kind of talk them off the ledge and ultimately have a good experience?
So, all right. Well, the one thing that we do different than the neighbor picked up their music again. I don't know if you can hear that. The one thing that we do is we have, I think I mentioned this to you before, but we have a fun meter. And I didn't get this idea myself. I can't take credit where credit's not due. But so I read this by Cal Newport, and he referenced somebody else. I don't remember the author, and he has a fun meter. And essentially it goes like the way it goes, and I'm going to oversimplify it. I'm not as articulate as Cal Newport, but he states that he's got a rich uncle, and his rich uncle has a fun meter. Let's say it's on a watch. And if it gets below 6 every day, then Cal Newport has 1 year to stay above 6 every day, or else he's not getting his $100 million inheritance.
Right.
Okay. So my approach every day is we always have to have the fun meter up.
Right.
And whether I have to make it happen or whether the class, which most of the time makes it happen, we always have a lot of fun. So your question is like, how do we get people involved? Usually that people see us acting goofy, breaking the ice, joking, banter. I encourage my students to banter. A healthy banter is good.
Yeah.
I'm okay with being teased.
Yeah.
I try not to tease too much on a personal level, only because that could be construed differently by somebody that like the untrained ear. Yeah. But nevertheless, we have a fun meter, and that's what gets kids on the mat. I've had kids on the mat that just cry. Oh goodness. They want to do all the warm-ups, which are fun. They're animal moves, and we're jumping and we're moving and we're crawling, and we're looking goofy because we're doing the animal sounds as we're doing them. Yeah. Not the adults, even though unless they want to. but then they cry, and when it comes to class, but you know what? They'll keep coming because the fun keeps them in.
Yeah.
And before you know it, they're just a regular kid on the mat doing their work. Also, though, so for people that, let's say the fun meter got them on the mat, but what's going to keep them engaged?
Right.
We try our best to meet people on their learning styles. So sometimes you'll find that people are visual learners.
Mm-hmm.
I have one kid in particular that he's the only one allowed, as long as he follows the guidelines for respect, to turn his back and be laying down and not paying attention. And I'll say, hey, I won't say his name. Hey, what did I just say? And he'll repeat it verbatim.
Right.
He's an audio learner.
Auditory. Yeah.
Auditory. Yes. But he's not a visual learner.
Right.
He can stare at it, but he doesn't comprehend. Most people, what we find, are kinesthetic learners, where it's like, do this, then that, and then start building up the speed. So all our lessons are designed to meet both the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain on purpose. Like it's by design. And I learned that through the format model. Which is last name is McCarthy. I can't remember what her first name is off the top of my head, but if you ever look up the format model, mm-hmm. Just how it was developed is just awesome, because this lady is so humble, but yet she's revolutionary in her educational process. It's amazing. I can't give this lady enough credit. As a matter of fact, I feel bad for forgetting her name, because she deserves a shout out. Yeah. So,
well, I'll look it up and put her in the show notes.
Sure.
So, because I'm intrigued too. I want to, since I teach with self-defense and CCW and firearms, it's adult learning concepts, and not all adults in cybersecurity too. Like not all adults learn the same way, and you can't put anything in a one-size-fits-all model.
Sure.
And I think maybe people think like, oh, well, jiu-jitsu, you just go and they're going to tell you, do this move, do that move. And it is very kinesthetic, because you have to do the moves to learn them. But I didn't know that before, that it really does incorporate so much that lets you use both sides of your brain, which is strengthening so many other areas of your mental health and your mindset.
Right.
So one last question. Sure. A story of transformation you witnessed from one of your students.
Oh,
I'm sure you have many.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to figure out what's my most favorite ones.
Yeah.
So how about this? Grant me the grace to have two.
Okay.
So I've had my fair share of kids that couldn't go. So I'm trying to put this correctly, only because I don't want to oversimplify it. So They were on the spectrum. Okay. Of various, I wouldn't say mental, I wouldn't call it a disability, because these kids could train jiu-jitsu. It was awesome. It's awesome. I have a smile. It's hard not to smile thinking about that.
I love that.
But I have kids that I had one kid, the most extreme is every time it wouldn't go his way, he would just let out this gut-wrenching scream. Oh, goodness. And I'd be like, man, these parents are going to take all their other kids out, right?
Yeah.
And he was kicked out of other schools. He was not kicked out, but asked to not come back. Right. Politely. And he would sometimes, luckily he knew the other kids, that he would bite. Oh, and I'm like, man, these I'm so glad they know the family, because I'm going to lose all my students, and I'm going to have a lawsuit, or I'm going to have a poor, I'm not really worried about this portion so much, but I'm going to have a poor review. Right.
Yeah.
but you know what? This kid turned it around, and he stayed calm under pressure. He stopped screaming, stopped biting, stopped fighting. Ended up competing, really dealing with it well. The parents thought he was doing so well, they lowered his medications. As last speaking, so usually we lose all jiu-jitsu schools. Right. You lose, I call it the 12 to 14%. Right. because out of every 100 people, you're going to lose, and this is statistically proven.
Right.
About 86% of every new member that comes in. So
Right.
all the members that come in, you're going to lose 86% of them.
Wow.
But with kids, you usually lose them you'll have one or two that'll stay, but you usually lose them between the ages of about 13 to 16, 17.
Right.
They're going through weird stages.
Yeah.
They have weird smells. They listen to strange music, right? They have strange haircuts, right? Yeah. So, I mean, puberty gets the best of us all. So anyway, but this kid, from what I heard last, is that he wasn't on medication anymore.
Oh my gosh.
And the parents would tell me, man, we don't pay you enough.
Oh, I love that.
We don't pay you enough. And he's not my only kid. But that's the one that I'm the most proud of, because I love that kid. I absolutely love him. So, and again, he started junior high. So again, his voice got real deep.
I know.
And
it's weird. Like when my nephew, I'm like, what happened to my baby nephew? No.
Yep. And he's got hair in weird places, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, your viewers all should know about puberty, hopefully.
Right.
Anyways, but then I've had one student who, my older students have always been the most inspiring to the younger ones. And I've tried to tell them this, and hopefully one day they'll listen to this podcast and know that on a public forum, I'm telling the truth.
Yeah.
Right. And not that they didn't believe me, but for them, they're humble. So they're trying they're so in awe of how these younger men and women move that they're thinking, oh, I can never do that. But they're so inspiring to the older group.
Right.
Whether the young group says something, for lack of a better term, ignorant, like, I hope I move like you when I'm that age, right?
Right, yeah.
Or they're like, man, look at that. Look at him. Like, he's sweating, or look at her. She's sweating, you know, she's got kids and she's got a family and a business, and she's here and she's sacrificing and she's doing what we're doing, right? Some of my older students don't recognize that people are watching. But the point of this is that I got one student who people thought he was going to quit. If they were to pick a lineup, you're to put a lineup and says, okay, everybody, well, here's the over under. Who do you think is going to quit? This was the person.
Yeah.
Kind of out of shape, kind of socially awkward, glasses, not the most up-to-date haircut.
Right.
Just kind of standoffish, not introverted, but not extroverted, soft-spoken. I mean, you name it, all the stereotypes of somebody that wasn't tough. Right. That was them. That was them. And they're still with us today.
Oh.
We're 3 years in, and they're still training with us. And that, even though this person, if there's time permitting or another time, I'll tell you the story about his recruiting strategy.
Right.
But because you're like, as a business owner, don't say that.
Right.
Anyway, so those are two transformations that really come to the forefront as we speak now. I mean, there's different spectrums. I can give you, we can go on about transformations. I could write, probably a 4 or 5 page essay on transformations and what I've seen, for example, but both male, female, teenager, youth, but nevertheless, those are the two that come to mind. So,
well, I love that. That's like I said, my nephew, he's 15 and just got his brown belt, and it's been great for him, and and I'm glad he stuck to it through these awkward puberty years.
Well, I saw the picture of him. I think I'm not sure what form of jiu-jitsu he's doing, but I saw that they were doing a little bit of strike. They looked like they were doing some striking. Maybe. And normally you find like that the students that do striking, you can keep them from 13 to 17. Usually our kids transition like to Muay Thai. Yeah. Right. So that's one thing I found in my experience. And I probably hate to admit it, but I've probably seen like close to 1,000 children, come and go. Yeah. So.
Well, because this is the Confidence Academy, give me one last kind of boost of confidence for the listeners out there about, jiu-jitsu mindset, and just something that they can go, hey, I'm going to do this. Whether it's jiu-jitsu or that's something that they've been afraid of doing.
So I would say fail fast, fail often, fail here, and don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
We're as humans, you have to recognize your limitations, but it doesn't mean they should prevent you from trying something new.
Right.
And as I stated earlier, if you have a craftsman mindset, if you are glass half full, if you want a system for self-improvement that'll transcend, again, the mats, it'll transcend your other athletic endeavors, it'll transcend your health, it'll transcend your family, it'll transcend your workplace, staying cool under pressure, I would say, and develop your attributes and find that inner competitor, then jiu-jitsu is for you. That's what I would say to your listeners.
I love that. So how do people find you, whether they're local or if they're coming into town? And because I've had this happen where I've been out and somebody's been in town and they're like, oh, I'm visiting, but I'm looking for a jiu-jitsu studio just so I can keep my skills sharp or do whatever, because they're missing their own class.
Understood. So you can find us on Crossing Gracie Central Coast.com. It'll take you right to our page. You can also find us on Instagram. And all our information is there. You can give us a call. You can drop right in. If you let us know ahead of time, there's no drop-in fees. Other gyms have drop-in fees. And again, remember I told you earlier, it's probably not the best business strategy.
Right.
But like I always tell people, like you stated about other schools, my love for jiu-jitsu goes far beyond the flag that I fly. Right. So it doesn't matter if you're from a different school, a competing school. I think you'll find this about jiu-jitsu community is, for the most part, everybody's pretty open arms. I think we end up all being kind of extroverts.
Right.
Like we want to welcome people because the community still is very, very small. We're still only like 1 or 2 degrees of separation.
Right. So. Well, I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here and always pitching in, and for my women's self-defense class. Like when you show up at class and the one that we have coming up, the women are so excited that you're coming. Like, I don't think they care about me anymore. They're like, oh, we got a jiu-jitsu instructor? Like, great. Who are you, Kelly? So I thank you for that, because, it's women, and, like most of my students are older women, but some are bringing their kids or their grandkids, and just to give them that insight into the opportunity to build that confidence and that mindset at any age is greatly appreciated by me. And I know it's appreciated by my students and everyone you teach. So thank you so much for all you do.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
Well, I hope you got as much out of that as I did. And I'm not kidding. I teach classes with Albert, and I actually learned a lot today that I didn't know before. So I hope you learned a lot today too. And if you got a lot out of this episode, then like it and please share it, especially if you know someone who needs to hear this message. And please subscribe, so those who need to hear messages about confidence, resilience, and stepping into their power can hear that. So thank you again, and I will see you next week on the Confidence Academy.